So welcome to today's Previz Webinar. A big hello to everyone here. It's great to meet you all. My name is Chris Simcock and I'll be introducing you to Previz, which is a brand new product to the market. Now, I aim to speak for no longer than 45 minutes, and after you'll have an opportunity to ask me any related questions. Now, first off, let me introduce you to Previz and the main idea here. The vision really is to bring captivating ideas to life, and now you can easier than ever before. Laid out in front of you can see the Previz homepage, and here you can actually log into your customer account, and I'll be talking through the dashboard that you should be able to see over through my screen share. Now, once again, if you do have any questions, please save those for the end. You should have a chat dialog box, and we can enter answers and questions together. Now, here you'll see within Previz, you have the ability to work within teams. And it's great for sharing scenic data, as well as models and set designs with your team and clients. So here you can actually invite members, and that's something all done easily and quickly over the web. So you can preview your scene in an immersive and interactive way directly in your browser. Now you'll also notice, if I go back just one level here, in my account settings, I have the ability to integrate Cinema 4D and Blender. So here we can actually upload 2D content and 3D assets and map those to our surfaces. And this is perfect for projection mapping projects and large scale events. We'll speak about this in more detail in just a moment. Now, again, if I go back one level, we have two basic projects. And if I jump into a warehouse here, you'll see a 3D scene laid out, and we have some content to play back. Now, there is a unique button over at the top, and I'll be discussing this in a bit more detail as we move through. It's share. It's deceivingly subtle, but it's very powerful because here you can actually invite guests and they can go ahead and preview a project either on a mobile device, it could be a laptop, it could be a PC, it could be an iPad. So this is great because you can actually send project links to an unlimited amount of guests to help with the review and approval process on your projects. Again, they can directly preview scenes within their browser on mobile devices with no plugins required. And the aim here is to really allow you to present with confidence using Previz to win pitches and to communicate your designs during the working progress and once the designs have come to fruition. So that's the basic idea here. Let's talk through the workflow because you'll all be itching to learn a bit more about how to actually realize your projects. Now, over on the main dashboard, you'll see a projects tab, and I have one here called Welcome. So if we dive in here, let's talk a bit about the scene setup. It's three basic screens. I can navigate the scene all in real time through my browser. Now, before I dive into Previz itself, let's look at Blender because this project didn't appear by magic. So here is Blender. As a side note, Previz integrates directly with Blender and Cinema 4D, both in Windows and on the Mac side. So you do have an array of options. So I'll speak for a few minutes about how we can actually prepare Blender and Cinema 4D projects for Previz. Now, the first key ingredient are meshes, and here we have a center screen, we have house left, and we have house right. Those meshes have a texture applied, and in fact, it is a single 2K texture mapped across all three screens. Now we can see that content because those screens are UV mapped. You may be familiar with the process or you may not be. If not, there's plenty of tutorials out there to help you get going. I'll give you a basic introduction into UVs. In a nutshell, they allow you to take a 2D texture and map those across onto a mesh. And a UV map is in fact, whoops, let's reopen that. A UV map is very much what you see here. That center screen has a corresponding UV shell, and it's sampling the center region of this 2K texture. If I go ahead and move it, you'll see how over in the visualizer towards the right, the pixels we're sampling actually update. And Previz works along the same principles. We can upload our mesh objects over to Previz, and the UV maps are also included. So you'll see actually house left here has its own corresponding UV shell, sampling the left region of our 2K texture, and house right, it too has its own unique UV shell. Now over within Blender, you'll find a UV Maps tab. Here you'll see, in fact, we have a collection of UV maps. Now those UV maps, again, they're brought into Previz. The key, however, is if you look carefully, center screen, house left, and house right will contain a UV map called feed_all. And that's really important to note that if we wish to share one texture across multiple screens inside of Previz, the UV map itself must have a common name, and that's key. Now, if I just hop through, you'll also see we have the direct UV map, one called scaled up, and so on. And within Previz, we'll actually be able to see those UV maps in action. Now, once you've set up your Blender scene, your screens, you may have some props. Here I actually have this environmental prop. I have a texture that's actually baked into that prop. We can integrate and we can actually upload all those assets simultaneously to Blender, but that requires an explanation too. That leads us nice and neatly onto how to install add-ons for Previz. Now, once again, if you joined this webinar a little late, as I can see some of you have, welcome. Just as a side note, Previz does integrate into Blender and Cinema 4D. So you can actually upload your scenes in one go. Now over on the Previz website, you'll find a tab called Integrations. And below you'll find that you can actually download add-ons, Cinema 4D and Blender. Now I'll be discussing the add-on for Blender. The idea here is under File, you have User Preferences, and you'll have an add-ons tab. Here you can enable various plugins, and I'm going to go ahead and just search for one called Previz. Now I've already enabled this, but the key, if you haven't done so already, is to select Install from File. And if we come over to Downloads, you'll find I have a .zip. I've downloaded this directly from the Previz website. You can also download this directly from your account. We glanced this earlier. Just going to hop out of the project for a moment. Over on your main dashboard, under Account in your Integrations tab, you can also download the plugin. Once you've done so, there's no need to unzip this. It should be a quick and easy process. Just select the .zip and install from file. Once you've done so, it's important, it's subtle, there's actually a checkbox. Tick it, and that way the add-on is enabled. And you should then find a tokens button. So to actually fully enable this add-on, you need to generate a token, and that's done directly from your account. Next to the integrations tab, you'll have an API tab. Here you can create tokens, and the idea is to actually copy and paste a unique code directly into either Blender or Cinema 4D. The principle is the same. So it is really quick and easy, and once you've done so, just remember to select Save User Settings, and that way when you revisit Blender or Cinema 4D, that should remain intact, that plugin. Now over within Blender, you'll actually find to the right, we have a tab here called Scene, and you'll have the ability to refresh Blender, and it should capture information directly from your Previz account. And this is great because all of a sudden, I can see the teams that I've joined previously, and I can actually see projects that belong to those teams. We'll be discussing teams and projects, how they interact a bit more in a moment. Now, what's great is if you haven't already got the project created, you can select the clipboard to the right, enter a project name, and generate that project. And it should then become available within Previz. And you can also have multiple scenes. I have a scene called Scene 1, but by all means, you can create multiple scenes, which is great if, for example, you have screen elements that are moving throughout a production, if they're flying in or out, and you wish to demo to your client a production and different chapters of that production. So let's go ahead and have a look here. Okay. So there's our scene, and it's actually already been uploaded to Previz. Let's have a look at the project in a bit more detail. Okay, so now that we have a basic understanding of how to install an add-on and how to prepare a project for Previz, let's look directly at the project here inside our browser. Now, first and foremost, Previz, it supports Google Chrome, supports various browsers, but Google Chrome is the preferred browser to go with. It's basically any browser supporting WebGL. Now, once you've logged into Previz and into your project, you'll find you'll access the viewer. And this is a 3D interface where you can navigate a scene freely. Now, if you're using a mouse, you can orbit just by holding down the left click, dragging your mouse in any direction like so. You can also zoom in and out by scrolling your mouse wheel backwards and forwards. That gives you a nice step zoom. And you can dolly this internal camera just by holding down the right click and dragging your mouse in any direction. So navigation is quick and simple. You'll notice towards the bottom right, I have the ability to snap to camera bookmarks. And I'll discuss in a moment how you can actually generate those. But this is a great way if you wish to jump from stage right to stage left quickly and easily, for example, in front of a client. Now, over at the top, you have your status bar, your dashboard, whatever you'd like to call that. And to the right, we have Scene Config. Now here you can actually, you can have multiple scenes. We can create them within Previz, or as you saw earlier, we can actually generate new ones directly from Blender and Cinema 4D. I can rename those scenes and I can delete them and directly replace them here within Previz. And over below you have tracks. So if you're familiar with, for example, After Effects or media servers that use a timeline, then the principle shouldn't be anything new here. We can have multiple tracks and we sequence effects across those tracks. So we'll discuss sequencing in just a moment. Now over to the right you have maps. Here's where the magic really happens. So you'll notice I have a preview thumbnail, so I can actually upload content directly to Previz. But really important to note is you have mapping over to the right. So just to explain, notice you have feed_all. These reference the UV maps that we created, that we saw earlier within Blender. So screen center uses a UV map called feed_all. Same for house left and same for house right. And here we have a texture called feed_all as well. It's that 2K texture that we saw over in Blender. So that's really important, and these are default mappings which will allow you to apply content to the screen without actually sequencing it on the timeline to begin with. So it's almost like a default state. Now what's quite nice is over to the right you have masks. So if, for example, you wish to simulate the look and feel of an LED product, you can. So let's take house left here. Sorry, over onto pixels. And here you'll have a default library of thumbnail textures. They're part of a previous project by default. That's a mask applied, and you can choose how to array it. So you can see that this thumbnail here is applied to each and every pixel of that screen. And we do also support transparency if you have a semi-transparent screen in place. So it's really quick and easy to simulate the look and feel of LED at pixel perfect level. And again, this is all done in real time within your browser. Now, by all means, you can also upload your own unique pixel masks. If, for example, you have a chroma flood or a chroma batten, various unique lighting fixtures or LED products, you can upload your own pixel masks that you may have created in Photoshop or Illustrator. Now, as a side note, when it comes to image formats, PNGs and JPEGs are the preferred option. We're not directly supporting alpha because we're using a browser-based system here. Alpha is not actually an element that the browser is reading in. But by all means, masking is something that Previz does as well. So let's have a look over to the tab to the left that I skipped earlier. Let's discuss a little bit about this, this masks area here. So here you can actually select default textures to map to screens. So if we take, for example, center screen, you'll see, in fact, the black here is allowing us to remove areas of the screen laid out within our viewer. So it's really quick and easy to mask away. This would be popular if, for example, you have an array of my strips. Rather than modeling each and every my strip, you could use a simple mask and mask away the blanks in the reality. So it's really quick and easy, and you could create that again in, for example, Photoshop. Now over to the right, you have cameras. So here we can actually add camera bookmarks. It's really quick and easy. If I add another camera bookmark here, and I can actually unlock those cameras so I can edit their field of view and the clipping plane here if you're working with projects of various scales. Now within my scene, I'm going to make a new camera. If we come to viewer here, let's zoom all the way out. And let's select the camera icon at the bottom, and I can go ahead and hit add camera. And that too has added a bookmark. So if we go back into scene config, camera 4 is now available. And by all means, we can snap to it by hitting the arrows over to the bottom right here. So that's really quick and easy, and you can rename those however you like. And you can also reorder those cameras just by selecting and dragging them within the stacking order here. Now furthermost to the right, you have settings. You can change, for example, the background color of the scene. It's all quite self-explanatory. And also at the bottom, you can select which of the mappings or the UV maps we exported from our 3D application we're actually going to be using within the project. This is great if you have a vast array of mappings on offer and you wish to just simplify how those are being used within the project. Okay, so that's scene config in a nutshell. Again, if you have questions about that, let's discuss that at the end of the webinar. Now, if I jump over to content, this is where Previz really excels too. It's really easy to actually upload assets into Previz. There's an upload button to the top right. And by all means, you can select media. You don't even need to worry about the format or the codec because Previz will actually transcode for you media. There are preferred formats and codecs. If you do have the option, then by all means, Previz supports H.264s formatted to either QuickTime Movies or MPEG-4s. But again, it will actually auto-transcode for you. It also supports audio, so you can play back MP3s and AACs, and you'll be able to play that back directly from the browser too. You can switch between list mode and thumbnail mode, and you can actually also take videos directly from Dropbox, or as you saw, I did so from my local computer. Notice there's a subtle column of 3 panels. So this allows you to preview an asset in a new tab. And here is actually where you delete the asset. So it's quite a simple array of options here, but very quickly and easily, again, you can take those assets in and start mapping those to your screens. Now over furthermore to the right, we have our sequencer. So here you'll have your assets available too, and within Previz, you can really simply drag and drop those assets over to your track. So let me do a bit of a walkthrough here, and I'll just explain as well that this is so simple, it actually overcomes a hurdle that some users may find with, for example, media servers. Rather than learning the complexities of a server to actually generate a simple timeline, we can really quickly and easily drag and drop media onto our timeline to actually play this back. So I'll do that in just a moment. Okay, I'll get to this question in just a moment. Now I'm going to drag and drop Shutterstock over to my track. There it is. So again, it's really quick and easy. We have a module laid out across a layer called layer 1. By all means, you can rename this. I'm going to leave this as layer 1, that's fine. And when I select that module, you'll see a preview thumbnail of the clip and a start time and end time. So what's really nice here is the layer has actually resized itself to match the clip length, but we don't yet see it applied to the screens laid out in our scene. That's because we need to select mapping. Now, if I select direct center, there's that clip mapped directly to our center screen, hit play, and it's being applied and playing back in real time. Now, performance will be based on your network connectivity. If I simply change the mapping here to, for example, feed all, now that same clip maps to all 3 screens. So again, it's really quick and easy to map those clips across to your 3 screens, and we can really quickly build a timeline here. Now, if I wish to resize the module, I can change the duration. Let's move that out the way. You can also zoom in and out of your track if you wish to be more accurate about how you're sequencing here. I can actually select and drag that module across. And here you have your playhead in red. So I can change at what point we're playing back from. So it's all pretty intuitive. Now you can also change the start time more accurately over to the left and the end time. Now, by all means, you can actually stack. So we can have multiple layers laid out in our scene. For example, we could have a layer 2. And here's a clip called Equalizer, which I uploaded just now. This guy, let's go ahead and apply this to our track. And there it is. And that too has resized itself to the correct duration. Again, it's a case of just selecting a mapping. Let's have them the same length. And here, in fact, you're compositing. I have Equalizer playing across the center screen, and across the side screens, I have the Shutterstock content. So that's great. 2 clips playing back simultaneously. Okay. Now, a nice neat little trick as well. We have a cog to the right, so you can change the layer opacity. So you can actually do, for example, more like a cross-faded effect here. By all means, you could even pre-render transitions and bring those into Previz. And you can change the layer order just by changing those layers in the stack. Just select and drag the handles to the left. And you can have as many layers as you wish. And if you wish to delete that layer, just come down to the delete layer button. Okay, so that's a brief introduction to sequencing. Now over to the top, just notice you can see your precise playhead position. That's in minutes and seconds. You also have an audio icon, so you can enable or disable audio during playback. Now, again, it's worth just reiterating the share button. Once you've created a project, by all means, you can share this with guests. This is great if you wish to share a project and give a guest the ability to preview it on, for example, their iPad or a mobile device or a laptop. However, if we jump out over into our main dashboard, you'll notice that I have under Teams the ability under Members and Access and Guests, Projects, Settings, you'll see a button to the top right called Invite. Here I can actually invite people over to collaborate on my project, and we have permissions available. We have administrators, members, and then once again, guests, which you would have seen over in the project. And I'll just take a moment to discuss this because this is quite important. Admins, you can see, have full access to the team. So this includes the full directory of projects, user and team permissions. Whereas members, they can upload content across a timeline. They can upload scene data. So it's great for collaborators, freelancers, and contractors. But guests, this is where you limit the control. They are in a read-only mode or a preview mode. So this is great, again, for clients. You don't necessarily want those people actually editing the project directly. So that's something done really quickly and easily. Now over, you'll see the ability to switch between teams. So you may be a member of one team and an administrator of another, for example. And just as a side note, here you can also create projects. And over to the top right, this is where you actually log out from your account. Okay, so that's a very quick step through across Previz. I'll just take a moment now to discuss a little bit about how you can learn more about Previz, the online user guide and video tutorials where you can find those. So if we go to the Previz homepage, okay, we're at www.previz.co. You can see features, customers, articles, integrations, pricing, and support. Support's really important because here you can actually learn more about Previz from the Help Center. So you can read about how to get started. And you'll notice that the user guide, it's very succinct. You can learn about very specific topics very quickly. And over to the left, go back, you have video tutorials available. So you can learn about Previz just by watching a series of short videos, which are also available on YouTube. So that brings us towards the end of the webinar, a little earlier than I myself expected, but it gives us more time to chat. So if you have any questions, please post those now using your chat dialogue, and I'll do my best to answer those.